You're worthless, a complete waste of company resources. The words sliced across the festive atmosphere of the holiday party. My manager, Everett, stood in front of me, his face contorted with rage, spittle flying from his mouth as he continued his verbal assault. The string lights blurred through my tears as 50 colleagues fell silent around us, watching this public execution of my dignity. My crime? Suggesting improvements to our failing marketing campaign, improvements he'd rejected for months. I stood perfectly still, champagne flute steady in my hand while he continued his tirade about my incompetence. 3 years of this treatment flashed through my mind, my ideas dismissed, then mysteriously reappearing as his, my overtime unacknowledged, my achievements attributed to everyone but me. His wife Naomi touched his arm, clearly embarrassed. Honey, maybe. No, I interrupted softly. That's not what the board told me when they made me your new boss yesterday. He dropped his glass. Champagne splashed across his expensive shoes as whispers erupted around us. Naomi gasped, eyes widening in recognition. She'd been at the same yoga studio last week when I'd received the call confirming my promotion, a detail I hadn't connected until this moment. Everett's face drained of color as he stared at me. This is ridiculous, he sputtered, looking around for support. There must be a mistake. The mistake, I replied, my voice steady despite my racing heart, was thinking nobody would notice. Before I tell you what happened next, let me ask you something. Have you ever had that moment when everything inside you screams to run away, to hide from confrontation, but instead, you find yourself standing your ground? If you've ever faced someone who tried to diminish you, this story might resonate with you. Stay with me until the end, because what unfolded changed not just my career but my entire understanding of power. My name is Andy Mercer. I'm 32, analytical to a fault, and until recently, I was known as the quiet problem solver in our marketing department, the one who worked weekends to rescue failing campaigns but somehow never appeared in the success stories. I was raised by a single mom who taught me that hard work eventually pays off. For 3 years at Thompson Media Consultancy, I kept believing that. I joined the company with a master's degree and boundless enthusiasm. Everett became my direct supervisor 6 months later. He was charismatic, confident, the kind of person who dominated rooms without trying. His reputation as a marketing genius preceded him. The first time he took credit for my work, I told myself it was a misunderstanding. The second time, I wondered if I'd somehow failed to communicate my contributions clearly. By the third time, I recognized the pattern but convinced myself that speaking up would only label me as difficult. I watched as Everett systematically harvested ideas from every woman on our team. Lucia's client engagement strategy became Everett's revolutionary approach. Tessa's digital innovation framework appeared in his presentation to the executive team with his name on every slide. It's just how things work, whispered Tessa when I questioned it. You get used to it or you leave. But I couldn't accept that. Not when our team was genuinely brilliant. Not when I saw the resignation in the eyes of women who'd once been passionate about their work. 6 months before that holiday party, I started documenting everything. Not in a vindictive way, initially. It was just to validate my own sanity. I created a spreadsheet tracking project outcomes, noting which ideas came from which team members, and how credit was ultimately assigned. The data told a startling story. Projects conceptualized primarily by women outperformed others by 34%, despite receiving fewer resources and less executive support. The pattern was unmistakable. I might have kept this information to myself indefinitely if not for Vivienne Torres, a board member who visited our floor for a routine department tour. She stopped by my desk, noticed the color-coded efficiency charts on my screen, and asked what I was working on. Just some personal analysis, I replied automatically. She tilted her head. That doesn't look like personal analysis. That looks like business intelligence we should be reviewing at the board level. Something in her tone gave me courage. Would you have time for coffee sometime? There's something I think the board should know. 2 days later, in a quiet corner of a cafe 3 blocks from the office, I showed Vivienne my complete analysis. Her expression remained neutral until I finished speaking. The board has been concerned about our female employee retention rates. she finally said. Now I understand why we're losing so much talent. She closed my laptop gently. Keep documenting, keep excelling, and don't tell anyone we've had this conversation. For months, nothing seemed to change. I continued working, continued documenting, continued watching Everett take credit for others' brilliance. Then came the email inviting me to a confidential meeting with the board. I arrived 15 minutes early, heart pounding. The boardroom felt cavernous with just me sitting there, waiting. When the door opened, I expected Vivienne. Instead, the entire board filed in. Ms. Mercer, began the chairperson, we've been reviewing your analysis alongside our company performance metrics. We've come to a decision about the future of the marketing department. My stomach tightened. Had I overstepped? Was I about to be terminated for collecting this data? We'd like to offer you the position of marketing director, effective immediately. I blinked, certain I'd misheard. I'm sorry, what? Everett will report to you starting tomorrow. We've already drafted the announcement. But he has 10 years more experience than I do. The chairperson leaned forward. Experience isn't just measured in years, Miss Mercer. It's measured in results. Your hidden contributions have kept this department afloat while being attributed to others. Imagine what you could accomplish when you're actually acknowledged as the leader. I hadn't told anyone about the promotion. I wanted to process it myself first, to prepare for the inevitable backlash. I certainly hadn't planned to announce it at the holiday party in front of everyone, but Everett's public humiliation of me forced my hand. Now, standing amid the shocked silence following my revelation, I realized the real challenge was just beginning. Everett's expression had morphed from shock to something darker, more calculated. We should discuss this privately, he said through clenched teeth, grabbing my elbow. I gently removed his hand. We can meet in my new office tomorrow morning at 9, I said, loud enough for nearby colleagues to hear. I'll be reviewing the department structure. As I walked away, conversations erupted behind me. I could feel Everett's eyes burning into my back, but I didn't turn around. Instead, I found Lucia and Tessa huddled near the dessert table, watching me with wide eyes. Is it true? Lucia whispered. I nodded. He'll make your life hell, Tessa warned. Probably, I agreed, but he'll have to do it as my subordinate. For the first time in years, I slept deeply that night, waking refreshed despite the challenges I knew awaited me. I arrived at the office an hour early to find my belongings already moved to the director's office, a glass-walled space 3 times larger than my former cubicle. On the desk sat a single yellow sticky note. Enjoy it while it lasts. I was reviewing department files when Everett appeared in my doorway precisely at 9, wearing a smile that suggested our confrontation had never happened. Andy, congratulations on the promotion. I think there's been some confusion about reporting structure, but I'm sure we can sort that out. I gestured to the chair across from me. No confusion, Everett. The board was quite clear. His smile tightened. Look, I've been running this department for 7 years. The clients know me. The team respects me. This arrangement won't work. It already is working, I replied, sliding a folder across the desk. These are the new department guidelines. The board approved them yesterday. He flipped through the pages, his face darkening. A complete restructuring, team rotation, mandatory documentation, of idea origination. He threw the folder down. This is micromanagement. This is transparency. I finished for him. Every idea will be attributed to its creator. Every team member will receive credit for their contributions. He leaned forward, voice dropping to a threatening whisper. You think you've won something here? I built relationships with every client we have. One word from me, and they'll walk. I'd anticipated this. The board has already informed our top 10 clients about the leadership change. They've expressed enthusiasm about the new direction. This is about yesterday, isn't it? His voice rose again. You couldn't take a little constructive criticism, so you went crying to the board with some sob story. This is about 3 years of systematic appropriation of others' work. This is about creating an environment where innovation is rewarded regardless of who generates it. Everett stood abruptly. You've made an enemy today, Andy, and I'm not someone you want as an enemy. As he stormed out, I noticed Lucia standing just outside the glass wall, Having witnessed the entire exchange, she gave me a small, hopeful smile. That smile was worth whatever battle was coming. The following weeks brought exactly the challenges I'd expected. Everett accidentally excluded me from critical client communications. Meeting invitations mysteriously disappeared from my calendar. Documents I needed for presentations went missing until just minutes before I was scheduled to speak. But I'd prepared for this. I'd created redundant communication channels, set up automatic backups, and most importantly, I'd started meeting individually with team members, particularly those who'd been silenced before. Your content strategy for the Harrington account is brilliant, I told Tessa during one such meeting. I'd like you to present it directly to the client next week. Her eyes widened. Me? But Everett always handles the Harrington presentations. Not anymore, I said. It's your idea. You should present it. One by one, I gave team members ownership of their ideas. The results were immediate and stunning. People who had been going through the motions suddenly came alive with creativity. Projects improved dramatically when their true architects were allowed to guide them. Everett's desperate attempts to undermine me grew more obvious as his influence waned. Whispers about how I'd slept my way to the top began circulating, whispers that mysteriously originated near Everett's new workspace. I never confronted these rumors directly. Instead, I let my work speak for itself. I implemented a weekly innovation showcase where team members presented their current projects and received public recognition. Notably absent from these showcases was any original contribution from Everett. When his turn came to present, he'd offer vague strategy platitudes or recycle concepts from industry publications, sometimes word for word. The defining moment came 3 months after my promotion. Our biggest client, Harrington Industries, was considering expanding their contract to include our international division, a deal worth millions. I assigned the proposal development to a diverse team that included Lucia, Tessa, and 3 other previously overlooked employees. The night before the presentation, I left their completed presentation materials in a labeled folder on my desk, planning to review them one final time in the morning. When I arrived at 7 a.m., the folder was gone. The building security logs showed only one other person had entered our floor since the cleaning crew left at midnight, Everett, who had badged in at 5:43 a.m. and out again at 6:12 a.m. At 8:30, I received an email from him. Andy, I took the initiative to handle the Harrington presentation myself today. As the person with the longest client relationship, it makes sense for me to lead this. I'll let you know how it goes. End. I checked the conference room booking system. He'd moved the meeting to an off-site location, a restaurant 15 minutes away. The meeting was scheduled for 9 a.m. I had minutes to act. I grabbed my phone and called Vivienne Torres. Andy, is everything all right? Her voice was calm, professional. Everett stole the Harrington presentation and moved the meeting off-site. I need help. Her response was immediate. Text me the address. I'll handle it. I had no idea what "I'll handle it" meant, but I trusted her. I sent the restaurant address, then gathered every backup copy of the presentation materials I could find. This was exactly why I'd implemented our new triple backup system. When I arrived at the restaurant, breathless and clutching my materials, I froze at the entrance. Through the window, I could see Everett already seated with the Harrington team, 5 executives in business attire listening intently as he gestured emphatically. Before I could push through the door, a sleek black car pulled up, and Vivienne stepped out, followed by 2 other board members and, most surprisingly, Eleanor Harrington herself, the founder and CEO of Harrington Industries. Perfect timing, Vivienne said, straightening her blazer. Eleanor and I were having breakfast when your text came through. She was quite interested to hear about our new transparency initiative. Eleanor Harrington, a commanding woman in her 60s with sharp eyes that miss nothing, nodded briefly. Vivienne tells me you've been revolutionizing how credit is assigned for creative work. As someone who spent decades watching men take credit for my innovations, I'm intrigued. Together, we walked into the restaurant. The look on Everett's face when he saw our group was a masterpiece of dawning horror. Everett, Eleanor said warmly, I didn't realize you'd be presenting today. The schedule my office received listed Andy Mercer and her team. Everett recovered quickly, flashing his practiced charm. Last-minute change, Eleanor. Given my history with Harrington, I thought it best I handle this personally. How thoughtful, Eleanor replied, her smile never reaching her eyes. But since Andy is here with the board members, why don't we let her proceed as planned? Actually, I interjected. The presentation was developed by a team that isn't here. Lucia, Tessa, and 3 other colleagues created this proposal. I'm just delivering their work. Eleanor's eyebrows rose with interest. Giving credit to the actual creators? How novel. She shot a pointed look at Everett. I'd very much like to hear what your team has developed, Andy. As I set up the presentation, Everett leaned close to whisper, "This changes nothing. You're still out of your depth." I proceeded to present the team's international marketing strategy, carefully attributing each section to its creator. When I finished, Eleanor and her executives were nodding appreciatively. This is precisely the innovative thinking we've been looking for, Eleanor said. Particularly the Asia-Pacific approach Lucia developed. Is there any reason we can't meet these team members directly? They're available now, I said, pulling out my phone. I can have them join us via video call in 5 minutes. Eleanor smiled. Perfect. What followed was a 45-minute discussion where my team members, appearing on my tablet screen propped at the center of the table, directly answered questions about their components of the strategy. Their expertise shone through, their passion undeniable. Everett sat silent, growing increasingly rigid, as it became clear he couldn't answer the technical questions the Harrington team posed. He didn't understand the strategy well enough to claim it as his own. When the meeting concluded, Eleanor walked me to the door. Vivienne mentioned your analysis of performance metrics correlated with idea attribution. I'd like to see that data sometime. I'd be happy to share it, I replied. Good. And Andy? She lowered her voice. I recognize what you're doing here. 20 years ago, I wish someone had done the same for me. She handed me her business card with a personal number written on the back. Call me directly if you need anything. In the weeks that followed, Everett's position became increasingly precarious. The Harrington contract was finalized, our largest deal ever, with explicit language requiring the original strategy creators to remain involved throughout implementation. Other clients began requesting similar transparency. Our new attribution system wasn't just an internal policy anymore. It was becoming our market differentiator. Everett's attempts to undermine me grew desperate. He began copying me on emails at 3 a.m., then scheduling 7 a.m. meetings to discuss them. He questioned every decision in public forums, trying to make me appear indecisive. He planted seeds of doubt with longtime clients, suggesting the company was becoming too focused on feelings instead of results. None of it worked. The department's performance metrics were undeniable. Projects moved faster. Client satisfaction scores rose. Employee retention improved dramatically. Meanwhile, Everett's individual contributions remained non-existent. Under our new system, he couldn't generate any measurable value. In 3 months, he hadn't originated a single implemented idea. I knew he was searching for other jobs. Our IT monitoring system flagged his resume uploads from company devices, but his lack of demonstrable personal achievements made finding comparable positions difficult. I could have fired him. The board would have supported that decision. But termination would have allowed him to play the victim, to create a narrative where I was the villain who'd pushed out a longtime leader over a personal grudge. No, I needed something more definitive, more transparent. The opportunity came during our quarterly department review. We had introduced a new evaluation system where team members assessed each other's contributions anonymously. The aggregated scores created a clear picture of who was driving value and who wasn't. Everett's scores were abysmal. Not because people disliked him. Our system specifically separated personal popularity from professional contribution, but because he genuinely added nothing of substance to any project. After reviewing the results with the board, we implemented a department restructuring. Everyone received new role definitions aligned with their demonstrated strengths. Every person except Everett, who was placed in a newly created position, documentation compliance specialist. His job? Ensuring all work was properly attributed to its original creators, monitoring for instances where credit was misappropriated, maintaining the integrity of our creative ownership system. the very system designed to prevent what he had done for years. The irony was exquisite. To succeed in this role, he would have to actively identify and prevent the behavior that had built his entire career. And every success in his new position would further validate the system that had exposed his inadequacy. I called him into my office to discuss the transition. "This is constructive dismissal," he said immediately. "You're trying to force me to quit." "Not at all," I replied. "This is a critical role in our new structure. The board specifically requested someone with your attention to detail. You're demoting me to a glorified clerk. I'm reassigning you to a position aligned with your demonstrated capabilities." I smiled. "You'll maintain your salary and title as associate director. Your office remains the same." "This is about revenge, isn't it? For all those times I pushed you to be better?" I leaned forward. "This is about transparency, Everett. Something you've never valued. I could sue for harassment." "You could," I agreed. "But discovery works both ways. All those emails would become public record. All those meeting recordings. All those documented instances where you took credit for others' work. Is that the legacy you want?" He had no answer. The following morning, his office was empty. Not cleared out, just unoccupied. I assumed he'd taken a personal day to consider his options. But he appeared just before lunch, carrying a box of personal items, his expression unreadable. "Moving offices?" I asked, genuinely confused. "Moving on," he replied. "I've accepted a position with another company." I felt a momentary pang of disappointment. Had he escaped the consequences so easily? That was quick. "Which company?" A flash of discomfort crossed his face. "It's more of a lateral move, a chance to build something new." 2 weeks later, I discovered where he'd landed. A former colleague sent me a social media screenshot. Everett beaming alongside a small group in a cramped office space, announcing his new role as marketing strategist at a startup I'd never heard of. The company had 3 employees, including him. I felt no satisfaction seeing his reduced circumstances. That wasn't the point of what I'd done. The real victory came 3 months later, during our semi-annual employee engagement survey. Participation, 100%. Satisfaction, up 42%. Trust in leadership, up 57%. Would recommend as a workplace, up 61%. And most tellingly, in the comments section, one anonymous response stood out. "For the first time in my career, I feel safe bringing my ideas forward. I no longer fear my contributions will be stolen. I no longer have to choose between advancing my career and maintaining my integrity." That was the real revenge, not destroying Everett, but creating an environment where people like him couldn't thrive, where the behaviors he represented became relics of an outdated workplace culture. 6 months after Everett's departure, Eleanor Harrington invited me to speak at a women's leadership conference. My topic? Transparency as transformation, how attribution drives innovation. As I prepared my presentation, I received an unexpected email from Naomi, Everett's wife, or rather, his ex-wife. The subject line read simply, "Thank you." The message was brief. "Andy, I don't know if you remember me from that holiday party. I'm writing to thank you. What you did at your company inspired me to look more closely at my own marriage." I realized I'd been allowing Everett to take credit for my contributions for years, not just professionally, but personally. The day after he started his new job, I filed for divorce. I've since launched my own interior design firm. For the first time in 15 years, my name stands alone on my work. I thought you should know the ripple effects of your courage, Naomi. I sat back, reading her words again. My actions hadn't just changed our workplace. They'd created waves I never anticipated. The night of the leadership conference, I stood before a room of 500 women and a few men to share what we'd built. Not just a new department structure, but a new paradigm where transparency served as both shield and spotlight, protecting the vulnerable while illuminating the truly innovative. The most powerful thing about transparency, I concluded, is that it doesn't require confrontation. It doesn't demand that you fight back against those who would diminish you. It simply illuminates the truth, allowing everyone to see clearly who contributes what. In that light, those who add value shine naturally, and those who don't. I paused, thinking of Everett in his cramped startup office. Those who don't must either change or fade away. The applause was thunderous. As people lined up afterward to speak with me, I noticed a familiar face waiting patiently at the edge of the crowd. Vivienne Torres. When the last attendee had gone, she approached, smiling. Impressive speech. Thank you for giving me the chance to have something worth speaking about. She shook her head. I gave you nothing but an opportunity. You built everything that followed. She handed me an envelope. The board asked me to deliver this personally. Inside was a letter confirming my promotion to Senior Vice President of Creative Strategy, a new position overseeing innovation across all departments. We're implementing your transparency framework company-wide, Vivienne explained. Every department, every team. The board believes you're the right person to lead that transformation. I thought of that holiday party, just 1 year earlier. How I'd stood frozen as Everett publicly humiliated me. How close I'd come to walking away, to becoming another talented woman who left rather than fought. How differently everything might have unfolded if I'd stayed silent. I'd be honored, I said. Later that night, as I sat in my hotel room reviewing the conference materials, my phone pinged with a notification. A business news alert. The startup Everett had joined had ceased operations after failing to secure second-round funding. I felt no joy at his failure, no vindictive pleasure. My revenge had never been about destroying him. It had been about creating a system where people like him couldn't survive unless they changed fundamentally. Some would call that mercy. I call it justice. 1 year after that humiliating holiday party, our company hosted another celebration. This time, I stood at the center, raising a glass to toast the highest performing year in company history. To transparency, I said. As 50 colleagues, many of them women who had nearly left before our transformation, raised their glasses in response. To transparency, they echoed. Somewhere across the city, Everett was likely updating his resume, preparing to charm his way into another position where he could take credit for others' work. But he would find fewer and fewer such opportunities. Our transparency framework had spread to other companies in our industry. Former team members had taken it with them to new positions. The ripples were becoming waves. In the end, my revenge wasn't firing Everett. It wasn't humiliating him publicly or destroying his career. My revenge was changing the game entirely, creating a world where the Everetts couldn't win anymore. And that was sweeter than any momentary triumph could ever be. If this story resonated with you, you've probably experienced someone taking credit for your work or ideas. Maybe you're still finding your voice, still gathering courage to stand up for yourself. Remember that transformation doesn't always require confrontation. Sometimes it just requires illuminating the truth in ways that can't be ignored. If you found value in Andy's journey, please like and subscribe to hear more stories of quiet revolution and justified revenge. And share your own experiences in the comments, because when we speak our truths collectively, we create spaces where the Everetts of the world can no longer thrive. The email notification pinged on my screen at 4:27 in the afternoon. The subject line read, "Urgent meeting requested, 9 o'clock tomorrow morning." My stomach knotted as I glanced at the next day's calendar. My promotion hearing was scheduled for 2 o'clock in the afternoon. 5 years of extra hours, brilliant campaign strategies, and client relationships that had increased revenue by 37% would finally pay off. The corner office with the view of the river was practically mine. I replied confirming attendance and continued reviewing my presentation. The promotion to creative director was between me and Natalie. We had started on the same day, but our approaches could not have been more different. While I built relationships with clients and mentored junior team members, Natalie cultivated alliances with upper management. The next morning, I arrived at 8:45, wearing a dark blue suit that projected confidence. When I entered the conference room, 3 people awaited me. Geneva from Human Resources, my direct supervisor Terrence, and Edmund, the division head. "Please sit," Geneva said, her face professionally blank. I lowered myself into the chair, noting how they'd positioned themselves across the table, a united front. There's been a serious complaint against you, Geneva began, sliding a folder toward me. According to multiple reports, you've been secretly working for a competitor while employed here. My mind went blank. What? Several team members claim you've been undermining projects to benefit another company, Terrence continued, not meeting my eyes. Specifically, passing sensitive information to Coastal Strategies. I stared at them. That's absolutely false. We have testimonies from 3 staff members, Edmund said firmly. This is extremely serious. This will go on your permanent record. The accusation was so outlandish I almost laughed. Tomorrow was my promotion hearing, and suddenly I was accused of corporate espionage. It wasn't coincidental. Who made these claims? I asked, already suspecting. That's confidential, Geneva replied. I reached into my bag and placed a small wooden box on the table between us. It was palm-sized, made of carved walnut with a tiny brass latch. Before you file that, you should see this. Geneva glanced at Edmund, who nodded. She opened the box, and confusion crossed her face. Inside was a single silk butterfly, handcrafted, brilliantly blue, with delicate wings spread wide. The room fell silent. What exactly are we looking at? Edmund asked. I leaned forward. That butterfly represents everything you need to know about these accusations. Their eyes locked on me as I took a breath, ready to explain how I'd uncovered something far worse than they could imagine. Hey there, it's me, Quinn. I know you're probably wondering what that butterfly means and how it connects to these crazy accusations. Trust me, it's about to get intense. If you're enjoying this story already, hit the like button so I know to keep going. Drop a comment with your own workplace nightmare. We've all had them. And if you want to hear more stories like this, subscribe to the channel. Now, let's get back to that meeting room, where 3 people were about to learn they'd made a terrible mistake. My name is Quinn Alder, 32 years old and known around the office for 3 things: my photographic memory, my inability to back down from a challenge, and the small notebooks I always carry. People joke that I document everything, but that habit would ultimately save my career. I joined the company fresh out of graduate school with a master's in strategic communications. My parents, a high school teacher and a nurse, had instilled in me a fierce work ethic and an almost pathological honesty. Growing up in a small apartment where every extra penny went toward my education, I learned the value of both hard work and integrity. The first 2 years at the company were exhilarating. I climbed from junior strategist to team lead by securing major clients and introducing innovative campaign approaches. By year 3, I was managing my own team and had caught the attention of senior leadership. That's when I first crossed paths with Natalie Breyer. Natalie transferred from the West Coast office with glowing recommendations and immediately positioned herself as my competition. Where I built my reputation on results, Natalie built hers on perception. She was brilliant at taking partial credit for successful projects and distancing herself from failures. Quinn is so detailed-oriented, she'd say in meetings. Sometimes I worry she gets lost in the minutiae while missing the bigger strategic picture. Her subtle undermining was masterful. She'd praise me publicly while planting seeds of doubt about my abilities. Terrence became our supervisor during my 4th year. He had a reputation for playing favorites, and Natalie quickly became his golden employee. They shared lunches, inside jokes, and seemingly had meetings I wasn't invited to. 6 months ago, the creative director position opened up. Both Natalie and I applied. The selection process included client feedback, team evaluations, and a final presentation to the leadership team. I spent weeks preparing my presentation, analyzing 5 years of campaigns, identifying patterns in successful strategies, and developing a 3-year vision for the creative department. 2 weeks before the presentation, strange things started happening. First, a major client called, confused about why we'd suddenly changed direction on their campaign. I never approved those changes, I said, reviewing the materials they'd been sent. Well, someone from your team said you had authorized a complete overhaul, the client replied. Then documents began disappearing from my digital folders. My presentation draft vanished, requiring me to rebuild it from an older version. Team members mentioned receiving conflicting instructions from me, instructions I never gave. Quinn told me to prioritize the tourism account, a junior designer said when questioned about missed deadlines on our financial client's project. I never said that, I countered, but the damage was done. The pattern was clear. Someone was systematically undermining my work and reputation. Initially, I suspected Natalie, but the sabotage seemed too widespread for one person. 3 days before these accusations, I stayed late to finalize my presentation. The office was nearly empty when I realized I'd left my notebook in the conference room. As I approached, I heard voices, Terrence and Natalie. "It's handled," Terrence was saying. "Quinn won't be a problem after Friday." "You're sure it'll work?" Natalie asked. "She's resourceful. Trust me," Terrence replied. "The evidence is convincing. By this time next week, you'll be moving into the director's office." I froze, heart pounding. They were planning something to discredit me before my promotion hearing. Instead of confronting them, I retreated silently. If they were creating evidence against me, I needed to understand what it was before defending myself. The next morning, I arrived early and connected a small recording device under my desk. I wasn't sure what I was looking for, but I needed protection. I also began carefully tracking every communication, every file access, and every meeting. That evening, reviewing the day's recording, I heard someone enter my office while I was in a client meeting. The sounds were unmistakable: drawers opening, papers shuffling, keyboard clicking. When I checked my computer logs, someone had accessed my email and sent messages to a Gmail address I didn't recognize. The subject line, "Weekly update on campaign metrics." That's when I understood. They weren't just trying to sabotage my promotion. They were framing me for corporate espionage. I needed to act quickly. The accusation meeting was clearly their trap, but they hadn't expected me to bring that butterfly. What they didn't know was that small blue butterfly represented months of meticulous counterintelligence that was about to expose something far bigger than a promotion rivalry. The butterfly, I said to the three people staring at me across the table, was a gift from my grandmother. She taught me that butterflies don't fight predators directly. They create illusions that reveal the truth. I reached back into my bag and pulled out a black notebook. 2 months ago, I noticed something strange. Our bid numbers were appearing in competitors' proposals, not leaked by me, but by someone with executive access. Edmund leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. "That's a serious accusation, which is exactly why I needed irrefutable proof," I replied, opening the notebook. "What you're about to see will change everything about this company. Are you ready to see the truth behind the illusion?" I opened the notebook to reveal meticulously documented entries, dates, times, and detailed observations spanning months. When I first noticed our proprietary strategy frameworks appearing in competitor presentations, I thought it might be coincidence, I explained. But after the third occurrence, I knew someone was leaking information. Geneva shifted uncomfortably. "And you didn't report this?" "To whom?" I asked pointedly. The pattern suggested the leak came from upper management. I turned to a marked page. I created a system. Each time I submitted reports or strategies to different executives, I embedded unique identifiers, subtle language variations, specific metrics rounded differently, distinctive phrasing that wouldn't be noticed unless you were looking for them. Edmund's eyes widened slightly. "You watermarked confidential documents?" "I tagged them," I corrected. And when our competitors mysteriously echoed these unique markers, I could trace exactly which version they'd seen and who had access to that version. I placed 5 printed presentations on the table, each highlighted with different colored markers. Yellow highlights show markers only present in Terrence's copies. Green indicates Edmund's versions. Blue represents the CEO's documents. Red shows markers in board materials. I pointed to a competitor's presentation that had been leaked to me by an industry contact who thought something seemed off. Notice the yellow highlights appearing in their materials, consistently, across multiple presentations. The leak wasn't coming from my team. It was coming from Terrence's copies. The room went silent. Terrence's face flushed dark red. "This is absurd," he stammered. "You've fabricated this entire thing. The butterfly pattern never lies," I said quietly. But that's not all I found. I produced a second notebook. When I realized what was happening, I started tracking more carefully. Communication patterns, meeting schedules, financial records. I slid the notebook toward Geneva. 2 weeks after every major client signing, Terrence receives a deposit into an offshore account. The amounts correlate to approximately 3% of each deal's value. "You've been spying on my personal finances?" Terrence shot to his feet. "That's illegal." "Actually, these are public records from a lawsuit involving your divorce," I clarified. "Your ex-wife's attorney submitted them as evidence of hidden assets. They're readily available in court documents." Edmund turned to Terrence, his expression hardening. "You've been selling our information?" "She's making this up," Terrence shouted. "This is a desperate attempt to save her job." If I'm making it up, I countered calmly, then how do I know about your meetings with Zach Palmer from Coastal Strategies? The same meetings you've been having twice monthly at the Riverside Cafe, always between 6:30 and 7:15 a.m.? His face drained of color. Or the fact that 3 days ago, you and Natalie met in conference room B where you said, and I quote, Quinn won't be a problem after Friday, and promised Natalie the director position? You were eavesdropping? He sputtered. I overheard you accidentally. But after that, I started recording conversations in my own office. I pulled out a small device from my pocket, which is how I know someone entered my office during client meetings, accessed my computer, and sent emails to create the appearance I was sharing information with competitors. I turned to Geneva. That's what these accusations are about. Terrence needed to discredit me before I discovered what he was doing, and he used Natalie to help create a false narrative. Edmund's jaw tightened. These are extraordinary claims, with extraordinary evidence, I replied, pulling out a flash drive. This contains all the documentation, the tagged documents, the pattern of leaks, the email logs showing access to my account when I was in client meetings that Terrence himself scheduled. Geneva took the drive hesitantly. If this is true, it gets worse, I interrupted. Natalie wasn't Terrence's first accomplice. Over the past 2 years, 5 women in senior positions were pushed out after similar misconduct accusations. All were competing for promotions against candidates Terrence favored. I placed printed HR records on the table, records I'd quietly gathered from sympathetic colleagues in human resources who had also noticed the pattern. Amira Chen, Destiny Williams, Josephine Rodriguez, Krista Parks, and Ella Thompson, all accused of ethical violations right before promotion decisions, all pushed out, all replaced by people who now report directly to Terrence, expanding his influence throughout the company. Edmund looked stricken. This is systemic. It's strategic, I corrected, and it's been happening under everyone's noses. Terrence lunged across the table, grabbing for my notebooks. You manipulative little. Edmund caught his arm. Sit down, Terrence. You're believing her? He snarled. I've been with this company for 15 years, which is exactly why no one questioned you, I said softly. You used your position to eliminate threats and consolidate power. You cultivated allies who would echo your accusations without question. You built a system where your word was never doubted. Geneva was scrolling through files on the flash drive, her expression growing more disturbed with each click. Edmund, you need to see this. The door suddenly opened, and Natalie appeared, her confident smile faltering when she saw the array of documents spread across the table. I was told you needed me for. Her voice trailed off as she registered the tension in the room. Perfect timing, I said. We were just discussing your role in falsifying evidence against me. Her eyes darted to Terrence, seeking guidance. Don't look at him, Edmund said sharply. Look at these. He pushed the highlighted competitor presentations toward her. Did you know about this? Natalie's perfectly composed facade cracked slightly. I don't know what those are. They're proof that Terrence has been selling company information to competitors, Geneva said. And evidence suggests he enlisted your help to frame Quinn. That's ridiculous, she said automatically, but her voice lacked conviction. I turned to face her directly. Natalie, I know you want that promotion. I understand ambition. But did you know about the other women? Did you know you weren't the first person he used to push someone out? A flicker of confusion crossed her face. What other women? The 5 before me, I said quietly. All accused of misconduct they didn't commit. All replaced by people loyal to Terrence. Natalie's gaze shifted to the HR records, then back to Terrence. Something changed in her expression, a dawning realization. You told me Quinn was actually guilty, she said slowly. You said there was already evidence, and you just needed my testimony to strengthen the case. He lied, I said, just like he's been lying to everyone. And once I was gone, how long before you became inconvenient too? Before someone else caught his eye as a useful ally? What would he fabricate about you then? The color drained from Natalie's face as the implications sank in. I didn't know, she whispered. I swear I didn't know about any leaks or… Shut up, Terrence snapped. Don't say another word. Actually, Edmund interjected, I think Natalie should say quite a bit more. In fact, I think we need to continue this conversation with legal present. He turned to Geneva. Call security to escort Terrence to the waiting area. He's not to touch any devices or contact anyone. Then get Angela from legal up here immediately. Terrence stood, his face contorted with rage. This is a setup. Quinn has manipulated all of you. The butterfly doesn't manipulate, I said calmly. It simply reveals patterns that were already there. As security arrived to escort Terrence out, Edmund turned to me. I owe you an apology, and I have many questions about how long you've known and why you approached it this way. I needed irrefutable evidence, I explained. Accusations against someone in Terrence's position wouldn't be believed without it, and I needed to understand how deep the problem went. Deep enough that we'll be dealing with the fallout for months, Geneva murmured, still scrolling through files. Natalie remained standing by the door, looking lost. What happens now? Edmund's expression was grim. That depends on your level of involvement. If you knowingly participated in corporate espionage, the consequences will be severe. If you were manipulated and can provide testimony about how Terrence operated, that's a different conversation. She swallowed hard. I didn't know about any information selling. He just told me Quinn was undermining the company and asked me to report things I'd noticed about her behavior. And you didn't question that? I asked. He's a senior executive, she said weakly. Why would he lie? The door opened again as Angela from legal entered, briefcase in hand. I understand we have a situation. That's putting it mildly, Edmund replied. We appear to have uncovered systematic corporate espionage, fraud, and falsification of evidence against employees. As Angela was briefed on the situation, I sat quietly, watching their reactions. The butterfly box remained open on the table, its blue silk wings catching the light. My grandmother's voice echoed in my mind. The smallest creatures often have the most effective defenses. Hours later, as I left the building, my phone buzzed with a message from Edmund. Promotion hearing postponed. Terrence suspended pending investigation. Need to speak with you tomorrow about next steps. I texted back a simple, I'll be there, and headed home. That night, I called Amira Chen, the first woman Terrence had pushed out. She answered on the second ring. It's Quinn Alder, I said. We need to talk. It's about Terrence Harlow and what he did to you. Her sharp intake of breath was audible. After 2 years, why bring this up now? Because I've found the pattern, I replied. And I think it's time we all compared notes. All? She asked cautiously. There are 5 of you, plus me, 6 women whose careers he tried to destroy. The line went quiet for a moment. Then Amira spoke, her voice gaining strength with each word. Tell me exactly what you need. I smiled into the phone. I need you to help me finish what the butterfly started. The call with Amira stretched past midnight. Her story mirrored mine with eerie precision. The sudden accusations, the evidence that appeared from nowhere, the witnesses who claimed to have seen things that never happened. By the time we hung up, she had agreed to contact Destiny Williams, while I reached out to Josephine Rodriguez. Within 48 hours, all 6 of us had connected. We created a secure group chat and began sharing our experiences. Each woman's story revealed another piece of Terrence's methodology, how he identified targets, cultivated allies, fabricated evidence, and systematically removed anyone he couldn't control. He waits until you're about to succeed. Krista explained during our first video call. My accusation came 3 days before I was supposed to present a new client strategy that would have doubled my department's revenue. Same pattern, Ella nodded. He strikes when you're most visible. When pushing you out will create the biggest cautionary tale for others. Josephine, who had left the company 8 months ago, leaned closer to her camera. The question is, what do we do with this information? Quinn still works there. The rest of us have moved on. Have we? Destiny challenged. I took a position with less responsibility and lower pay because my reputation was damaged. I'm still rebuilding what he took from me. I listened to these brilliant women describe how Terrence had derailed their careers. Studying their expressions as anger gave way to determination. They weren't broken, just redirected, like water finding new channels after a dam is built. I have a proposal, I said finally, but it requires commitment from all of us. The next morning, I met with Edmund and Angela in the CEO's office. Victor Porter, the CEO, was a tall man with thoughtful eyes who listened carefully as I outlined what I had discovered. This pattern of behavior represents more than just Terrence's misconduct, I explained. It reveals structural weaknesses in how the company handles accusations, evaluates evidence, and protects employees from retaliation. We're taking immediate action against Terrence, Victor assured me. His employment has been terminated, and we're investigating every promotion decision he influenced. That addresses the symptom, not the disease, I replied. What about the culture that allowed him to operate undetected for years? What about the executives who accepted his recommendations without question? What about the HR processes that failed to recognize the pattern? Victor leaned back, studying me. You've given this considerable thought. I've had considerable motivation, I countered. What are you proposing? Edmund asked. I placed a document on the table. This is a comprehensive reform plan developed with input from the 5 other women Terrence pushed out. It includes new accountability structures, independent review boards for misconduct allegations, and anonymous reporting systems with real protections. Angela skimmed the document, her eyebrows rising. This is extremely thorough. There's more, I continued. We want independent auditing of all promotion decisions from the past 5 years, with adjustments made where bias is identified. We want compensation for career disruption for the women who were pushed out, and we want a public acknowledgement of the systematic failures that allowed this to happen. Victor's expression tightened. That's asking a lot. Actually, I said calmly, it's the minimum required to avoid the alternative. Which is? Edmund asked cautiously. A joint lawsuit from 6 women with documented evidence of systematic discrimination, fraud, and corporate negligence, along with press coverage detailing how the company's leadership enabled Terrence's behavior for years. The room went silent. You're threatening us, Victor said finally. I'm offering you a choice, I corrected. Address these issues privately and thoroughly now, or address them publicly and painfully later. Quinn, Edmund began, his tone conciliatory. I'm not finished, I interrupted. There's one more thing, the Butterfly Initiative. The what? Victor asked. I handed him another document, a new company division focused on ethical business practices and workplace culture, headed by the 6 women who experienced Terrence's tactics firsthand. We know exactly where the vulnerabilities are because we lived them. You want us to create an entire division for you? Angela asked incredulously. We want you to invest in fixing what's broken, I clarified, with the people who understand the breakage best. Victor thumbed through the proposal. This would require significant resources. Consider the cost of not doing it, I replied. Continued talent loss, potential legal exposure, reputation damage. I need time to review this, Victor said. Of course, I agreed. You have until Monday. His head snapped up. 3 days? 3 days, I confirmed. The others are waiting for my signal. If we don't have a preliminary agreement by Monday, we move forward with the lawsuit and media strategy. That's not how this works, Victor said, his voice hardening. You don't dictate terms to this company. Actually, I smiled slightly. That's exactly how this works. Because while you've been focusing on Terrence, you haven't asked the most important question. Which is, Edmund asked, how deep does this go? How many other executives were aware of or benefited from Terrence's methods? How many promotion decisions throughout the company were influenced by similar tactics? I leaned forward. Because we've been comparing notes. And we have names, multiple names. Victor paled slightly. You're bluffing. I opened my phone and showed him a document with highlighted names, dates, and incidents. Am I? The weekend passed in tense anticipation. The other women and I continued building our case, reaching out to additional employees who had experienced similar treatment. By Sunday night, our evidence file had doubled in size, and 4 more women had joined our coalition. Monday morning, my phone rang at 7:15 a.m. It was Victor. We need to talk, he said tersely. My office, 8 a.m. When I arrived, the executive leadership team was assembled around the conference table, along with representatives from legal and HR. A stack of documents sat before each person. Victor gestured for me to sit. We've reviewed your proposals. I waited, my face neutral. They're ambitious, he continued, possibly unrealistic in their current form. Yet necessary, I replied. Angela cleared her throat. We've prepared a counter-proposal that addresses many of your concerns while maintaining operational feasibility. I accepted the document she slid toward me, scanning its contents. Most of our core demands remained intact, with adjustments to implementation timelines and resource allocations. This is a starting point, Victor said. We're prepared to negotiate in good faith. Good faith would have been nice 2 years ago when Amira was being escorted from the building, I observed. But I'll take it now. Over the next 3 hours, we hammered out a preliminary agreement. The company would establish an independent review board for all misconduct allegations, conduct a thorough audit of promotion practices, and provide compensation to the women affected by Terrence's actions. Most significantly, they agreed to create the Butterfly Initiative, a new division focused on ethical workplace practices, with Amira as its director, and the rest of us serving as founding members. One more thing, I said as the meeting concluded. Natalie, what about her? Edmund asked. She was manipulated by Terrence, but she made choices. She needs accountability, but also a path forward. I want her assigned to the Butterfly Initiative, for 6 months. Let her learn from the women she almost joined in exile. Victor considered this. That's unusually merciful. It's strategic, I corrected. Rehabilitation is more valuable than punishment. She has potential if it's directed properly. 2 weeks later, I stood in a renovated office space, watching as Amira directed the placement of desks and equipment. Josephine was on a video call with HR, discussing new reporting protocols. Krista and Ella were reviewing applications from employees interested in joining the initiative. Destiny was sketching a logo, a blue butterfly emerging from darkness. Natalie entered hesitantly, carrying a small box of personal items. Her confident stride had diminished, but there was something more authentic in her manner now. "Where should I set up?" she asked quietly. Amira pointed to a desk near hers. "You'll work directly with me for the first month. I want you involved in developing the anonymous reporting system." Natalie nodded, her expression solemn. "Thank you for this opportunity. I know I don't deserve it." "This isn't about deserving," I told her. "It's about becoming." As she settled in, Edmund appeared in the doorway. "The board approved the full budget this morning," he announced. "The Butterfly Initiative is officially activated." A cheer went up around the room. Amira caught my eye and smiled. Not bad for 6 women who were supposed to disappear quietly. I reached into my bag and placed the small wooden box on my new desk, opening it to reveal the silk butterfly. In the sunlight streaming through the windows, its blue wings seemed almost alive. "The butterfly doesn't fight the predator," I said, echoing my grandmother's wisdom. "It creates illusions that reveal the truth. And sometimes," Amira added, "it transforms the entire ecosystem." That evening, I called my grandmother to tell her how her gift had changed everything. "I'm not surprised," she said, her voice warm with pride. "You always understood the power of patience. Revenge that destroys only creates more destruction. Revenge that transforms, that's revolution." 6 months later, our initiative had implemented company-wide changes that increased retention rates by 17% and improved internal promotion equity by 23%. 3 other companies had approached us about implementing similar programs in their organizations. Terrence, meanwhile, had become unhireable in the industry. His attempts to minimize his actions had been undermined by thorough documentation that followed him to every interview. The last I heard, he was selling real estate in a small coastal town, far from the corporate world he once dominated. The ultimate revenge wasn't his downfall, though. It was the transformation of the system that enabled him. A transformation that turned his tactics into case studies on what not to do and elevated his victims into leaders of change. And that blue silk butterfly? It sits on my desk even now, a reminder that sometimes the most powerful response to predatory behavior isn't to fight directly, but to create something new from the experience. Hey, if this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and share it with someone who's facing their own workplace challenges. Have you ever stood up to someone who abused their power? Or maybe you've witnessed it happening? Drop a comment below with your story. Sometimes sharing these experiences helps others realize they're not alone. Subscribe if you want more stories about justice, transformation, and the quiet power of those who refuse to be silenced. Thanks for listening to Quinn's journey. Remember, every butterfly was once a caterpillar that endured darkness before spreading its wings. She slept her way to the top. My director, Thaddeus, whispered to the circle of potential clients surrounding us. His voice carried just enough to reach my ears as I approached with a tray of drinks, a calculated move on his part. The crystal glasses trembled slightly in my hands as I registered what he'd said. 7 years of working 80-hour weeks, bringing in millions in revenue, creating award-winning strategies that transformed struggling companies into industry giants, all reduced to this vile insinuation. I watched their expressions shift, eyes darting between my face and my body, reassessing everything they knew about me through this new, tainted lens. I stood frozen, my professional accomplishments dissolving into nothing. Then the ballroom doors opened. My husband entered in his formal attire, commanding attention even from those who only recognized him from television. Supreme Court Justice August Reed, the man I'd married before either of us had achieved career success, the relationship I'd kept private to avoid exactly these accusations. Thaddeus's complexion drained instantly. His champagne glass hovered midway to his lips, suspended in shock as realization dawned. I'd never seen terror flash across my director's face before this moment. It was beautiful. Before I tell you what happened next, I want to thank everyone who's been supporting these stories. Many listen without subscribing. If you're enjoying this, please consider subscribing so you don't miss future uploads. The support means everything. Now, let me continue. My name is Eliza Reed, though professionally, I've always been Eliza Wilder. At 36, I'd built my reputation as one of the most innovative strategists in corporate consultancy. I'm the quiet one who speaks only when necessary, the observer who notices patterns others miss, the problem solver companies call when everything else has failed. I joined Helix Strategy Group as a junior analyst 9 years ago after graduating at the top of my class. While colleagues networked at expensive restaurants, I developed revolutionary approaches that attracted major clients. My methods weren't flashy, they were effective. Data-driven, psychologically informed, and consistently successful. By year 3, I'd saved 3 major accounts from walking away. By year 5, I'd brought in 7 new Fortune 500 clients. August and I met during our final year of graduate school. He studied law while I pursued business strategy. We connected at a campus debate where we were assigned opposing positions. He won the formal argument. I won his attention. We married 6 months later at a courthouse ceremony with only our closest friends present. When August began his judicial career, we made a mutual decision to maintain separate professional identities. His rising prominence in constitutional law and my growing reputation in corporate strategy existed in different worlds. When he received his nomination to the Supreme Court 3 years ago, we agreed to strengthen our privacy to protect both our careers from claims of favoritism or conflict of interest. "I'll always be your husband first," August had told me on the night of his confirmation, but the world only needs to see Justice Reed. I hadn't anticipated how that decision would leave me vulnerable. Thaddeus Beck became my director 2 years ago after our previous department head retired. His arrival coincided with my biggest achievement, securing an international contract everyone deemed impossible. The praise from our CEO infuriated him. I noticed small changes at first. Being excluded from meetings, my recommendations questioned publicly, clients redirected to other strategists. Then the whispers began. Such a shame how she advanced. I overheard him tell a board member, "Some skills don't appear on resumes." I confronted him privately. "If you have concerns about my performance, address them directly." "Don't be paranoid, Eliza," he replied with a practiced smile. "I value every member of our team equally." The rumors intensified after I landed the Neurotech account a client Thaddeus had been pursuing unsuccessfully for years. My approach, focusing on sustainable growth rather than quick profit, had appealed to their leadership. The morning after the announcement, Lyndon from accounting stopped me in the hallway. "I need to warn you," she whispered. "Thaddeus is telling everyone you couldn't have achieved this legitimately." "What exactly is he saying?" I asked, already knowing the answer. "That you're sleeping with Neurotech's CEO. That it's how you've always moved ahead." Each promotion intensified his campaign. Each client meeting became a battlefield where I constantly proved myself while fighting invisible accusations. I documented everything, every email, every conversation where he undermined me, every instance where I was excluded despite being the most qualified person for the project. I never confronted him again. Instead, I worked harder, smarter. I built a network of allies within the company who knew my work ethic. I maintained detailed records of every contribution, every innovation, every dollar I brought to the company. But the whispers continued, spreading beyond our firm. At industry events, I noticed the sidelong glances, the sudden silences when I approached groups where Thaddeus had been speaking. My reputation, built on years of excellence, was being systematically dismantled. The rumors reached August through a clerk who'd interned at Helix before joining his staff. He came home one evening to find me staring at my laptop, reviewing client data through tears of frustration. "What's wrong?" he asked, loosening his tie. I hadn't told him about Thaddeus's campaign against me. August carried enough burdens with his position. But that night, everything spilled out. The rumors, the sabotage, the humiliation of having to prove myself repeatedly despite my record. August listened silently, his expression darkening with each detail. When I finished, he didn't offer empty reassurances or suggest I quit. Instead, he asked a simple question: when is your next company event? The annual industry gala next week. Why? Invite me, he said. I stared at him. We agreed to keep our marriage private professionally. Some principles matter more than privacy. His voice was quiet but determined. I won't stand by while someone destroys what you've built. The week before the gala crawled by, Thaddeus assigned me to host our newest potential clients, executives from 3 international corporations, considering 7-figure contracts with Helix. I prepared extensively, knowing they would be closely evaluating not just our services but me personally. The evening of the gala arrived. I wore a deep green dress, elegant but conservative. August would arrive separately, later in the evening. We had discussed our approach carefully. No dramatic confrontation, no scene that could reflect poorly on either of us professionally. Just truth, strategically revealed. The ballroom of the Avington Hotel glittered with crystal chandeliers and the jewelry of industry elites. I guided my group of potential clients through introductions, maintaining perfect professional composure despite the knot in my stomach. 2 hours into the event, Thaddeus appeared at my side. "Eliza, let me take over with our guests," he said smoothly. "The CEO wants to speak with you about the quarterly projections." It was a lie. I had just spoken with our CEO near the bar, but I nodded and stepped away. From across the room, I watched Thaddeus lean in, conspiratorially toward the clients I'd been cultivating for months. I didn't need to hear the words to know what he was implying. Their expressions told me everything. That's when the ballroom doors opened and August entered. At 41, my husband commands attention without seeking it. His presence carries the weight of his position without arrogance. Conversations paused as people recognized him, wondering why a Supreme Court justice would attend an industry gala for corporate strategists. I moved toward him, aware of every eye tracking my path. Thaddeus watched in confusion, then growing horror as August extended his hand to me. The terror spreading across my director's face was the first moment of satisfaction I'd felt in months. "Eliza," August said warmly, loud enough for those nearby to hear. "I apologize for being late. Court proceedings ran longer than expected." I took his hand, my voice steady. "I'd like you to meet some people." We moved through the crowd toward Thaddeus and the clients. Each step felt like reclaiming ground that had been stolen from me. My director attempted to retreat, but I gently touched his arm. "Thaddeus, I'd like to introduce my husband," I said. The clients looked between us in confusion, then shock as recognition dawned. Thaddeus's mouth opened, but no words emerged. "Justice Reed," one client stammered. "It's an honor." August smiled pleasantly. "The honor is mine. I rarely get to attend events in my wife's world. She's quite remarkable, isn't she?" The emphasis on wife lingered in the air. Thaddeus swallowed hard, his eyes darting toward the exit. "We've actually met before," August continued, focusing on Thaddeus. "Your company's workplace discrimination case files crossed my desk yesterday. Quite a fascinating pattern of allegations." Thaddeus stuttered. "What case files?" 5 former female employees have filed a joint lawsuit claiming systematic discrimination and defamation. Their evidence includes recorded conversations of you making remarkably similar accusations about any woman who outperformed expectations. August's tone remained conversational, but his words cut through the ambient noise of the gala. I've recused myself naturally, but I found the digital evidence particularly compelling. The clients stepped back slightly, creating distance between themselves and Thaddeus. I felt a wave of vindication watching the man who had tried to destroy my reputation scramble to salvage his own. Those are baseless accusations," Thaddeus managed. "The commission might disagree," August replied, "especially after reviewing those message threads where you discussed putting ambitious women in their place with other executives. I believe they're examining those tomorrow." The murmuring crowd now included 3 members of the Ethics Commission. As Thaddeus stood paralyzed, my phone illuminated with a notification. The first news alert about the lawsuit had just published. I showed him the screen. "Every woman you've targeted provided evidence. We didn't sleep our way anywhere. but you're about to fall based entirely on your own words. What happened next would change everything about my career, my privacy, and the power dynamics I'd navigated for years. The expression on Thaddeus's face transformed from terror to something far more dangerous, the cornered look of someone with nothing left to lose. "You have no idea what you've done," he whispered, his voice barely audible. "No idea who you're really dealing with." Before I could respond, he turned to the gathering crowd with a smile that sent chills through me. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced, "since we're sharing secrets tonight, I believe there are a few more you should know about Eliza Wilder. Or should I say, Eliza Reed." The room fell silent as Thaddeus reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out his phone. Whatever he was about to reveal, I realized with growing dread, he had been saving it for precisely this kind of moment. "Before Justice Reed arrived," Thaddeus continued, "I was explaining to our potential partners about Eliza's unconventional methods. Let me demonstrate exactly what I meant." He turned the screen toward the clients, then began passing it around. With each person who viewed it, I watched their expressions change from curiosity to shock. What had Thaddeus been collecting? What was he showing them? August stepped forward. "That's enough." "No," Thaddeus replied. "I don't think it is. The Supreme Court's Ethics Committee might find these interesting as well. After all, conflicts of interest work both ways, don't they, Justice Reed?" The room spun around me as I realized this confrontation had just escalated beyond anything we had prepared for. Thaddeus hadn't just been spreading rumors, he'd been building a case against me. Against us. And whatever evidence he thought he had, he believed it powerful enough to threaten a Supreme Court justice. August's expression didn't change, but I felt his hand tighten around mine. We had walked into something far more complex than workplace rumors. As the phone made its way through the crowd toward us, I braced myself to discover exactly what Thaddeus had been hiding, and what I would have to do to protect everything I'd built. The phone reached my hands. On the screen was an email chain, between August and the CEO of Neurotech, dated 2 days before I secured the account that had triggered Thaddeus's most vicious rumors. The subject line read, "Regarding Helix Strategy Group and Eliza Wilder." My heart stopped. I scrolled through the exchange, seeing August introducing himself as my husband to Neurotech's CEO, mentioning he'd heard they were considering strategic partners, and suggesting they give Helix, specifically me, consideration based on my track record. It was a personal reference, nothing more, nothing unethical, nothing that overstepped professional boundaries. But in Thaddeus's hands, carefully edited and stripped of context, it appeared that August had used his position to influence business decisions in my favor. "This proves nothing," I said, keeping my voice steady. "Doesn't it?" Thaddeus's confidence grew as he addressed the room. "A Supreme Court justice using his influence to secure contracts for his secret wife? I wonder how many other clients received similar persuasion. The Ethics Committee might—" "That's quite enough manipulation for one evening," came a new voice from behind us. We turned to see Nadia Emerson, CEO of Neurotech, standing with a glass of sparkling water in her hand. Her unexpected presence silenced the room. She moved toward us with the confident stride that had helped build her company into a technological powerhouse. "Mr. Beck, is it?" she asked, though she clearly knew who he was. "I'm curious why you're sharing private correspondence without context, especially when you've edited out key elements." She turned to the gathered clients and pulled out her own phone. The full email exchange included Justice Reed identifying himself as Eliza's husband for transparency, explicitly stating he was reaching out as a private citizen, and noting that he would understand completely if they chose not to respond to avoid any appearance of impropriety. My response thanked him for his transparency and informed him that we were already evaluating Helix's proposal on its merits alone. Nadia's gaze swept the crowd. "We chose Miss Wilder's strategy because it was superior, period. I find it disturbing that someone would deliberately misrepresent this interaction for professional sabotage." Thaddeus's moment of triumph crumbled. I watched his confidence fracture as Nadia continued. "In fact, Mr. Beck, your proposal to Neurotech was rejected because it recommended aggressive cost-cutting measures that would have compromised product quality. Ms. Wilder's approach preserved quality while finding efficiencies elsewhere. That's why she succeeded where you failed. Nadia's words were precise, professional, and devastating. Thaddeus attempted to recover. That may be your interpretation, but it's not an interpretation, Nadia interrupted. It's documented fact. Just as it's documented fact that you attempted to contact me privately after we signed with Helix to suggest that Miss Wilder was unqualified. You implied she had secured our business through improper means. I terminated that conversation immediately and reported it to your CEO. The crowd shifted uncomfortably. Several people moved away from Thaddeus, creating a visible circle of isolation around him. Mr. Beck, August said quietly, defamation has legal consequences beyond workplace discipline. This isn't over, Thaddeus hissed, but his bravado had evaporated. He backed away, then turned and pushed through the crowd toward the exit. The tension in the room gradually dissipated as conversations resumed. Several people approached to express support, including two of the clients Thaddeus had been poisoning against me. Nadia exchanged contact information with them, casually mentioning how pleased Neurotech had been with my strategies. As the evening continued, I should have felt vindicated. Instead, I felt hollow. The public support was gratifying, but the damage to my privacy was done. Everyone now knew about my marriage to August. The separation of our professional lives, something we had maintained for important reasons, had been shattered in a single evening. Later that night, as we drove home in silence, August finally spoke. I'm sorry, Eliza. My suggestion to attend the gala created exactly the situation we've always tried to avoid. No, I replied, staring out the window at the passing streetlights. Thaddeus would have escalated his campaign regardless. At least this way, we controlled some of the narrative. What happens now? I turned to look at my husband, this brilliant, principled man who had stood beside me tonight. Now I finish what Thaddeus started. The next morning, I received a message from our CEO requesting an immediate meeting. When I arrived at his office, he wasn't alone. Our chief legal counsel and the head of human resources sat beside him, their expressions grave. Eliza, the CEO began. First, let me apologize for what you've experienced under Thaddeus's leadership. We were unaware of the extent of his behavior until recently. Until the lawsuit, I clarified. The CEO nodded. The 5 former employees filed jointly last week. Their evidence is substantial. We've placed Thaddeus on administrative leave pending investigation. I appreciate that, I said carefully. However, the legal counsel interjected. We need to discuss your situation. Your relationship with Justice Reed creates certain complications. My marriage has never influenced my work, I stated firmly. We're not suggesting it has, the CEO assured me. But perception matters in our industry. Clients might question whether your connection to Justice Reed gives Helix an unfair advantage. I understood the subtext immediately. They weren't firing me, but they were preparing to distance themselves from any controversy. After 9 years of exceptional service, I was becoming a liability. What are you proposing? I asked. A lateral move, the HR director suggested. Same compensation, but in a research position with less client contact until this situation resolves. A demotion disguised as a transfer. After everything Thaddeus had done, I was the one being penalized. I need time to consider my options, I said, rising from my chair. Of course, the CEO replied, relief evident in his voice. Take the week. We value your contributions, Eliza. We just need to manage this situation carefully. I walked out of that office with perfect composure, collected my laptop and a few personal items from my desk, and left the building. In my car, I finally allowed myself a moment of pure, unfiltered rage. Thaddeus had done this, destroyed my privacy, damaged my professional standing, and forced me to choose between retreat and confrontation. That evening, when August returned home, I had spread dozens of documents across our dining table. Financial records, emails, performance reviews, client testimonials, 9 years of my professional life laid bare. What's all this? He asked. Evidence, I replied without looking up. I'm not accepting their offer to hide me away. August studied the papers. You're building a case. I'm taking control of the narrative. I finally met his eyes. Thaddeus didn't just attack me on a personal level. He systematically undermined the achievements of every successful woman at Helix. 5 have already come forward, but there are more. How many more? 11 that I've identified. Women who left the company after encountering similar obstacles. 3 were on partner tracks before Thaddeus arrived. None made it. August sat down beside me. What do you need from me? Nothing, I said honestly. This isn't about using your position. This is about using mine. The connections I've built, the respect I've earned, the strategies I've developed. I'm going to dismantle what Thaddeus created, but I'll do it my way. The next day, I called Nadia Emerson and requested a meeting, not as a consultant, but as someone seeking advice. She invited me to her office that afternoon. You're not planning to sue Helix, she observed after I explained my situation. It wasn't a question. No, I confirmed. Lawsuits drag on for years. They drain resources and attention. And ultimately, they don't change systems. So what are you planning? I'm creating a new system, I said simply. I've identified 11 women who left Helix after experiencing discrimination similar to mine. Each possesses exceptional skills that Helix undervalued. Together, we represent expertise across every aspect of strategic consulting. Nadia's expression shifted from curiosity to interest. You're starting a competing firm. I'm creating an alternative. I corrected. One built on the principle that talent deserves recognition regardless of gender. One where achievement is measured by results, not relationships. That requires capital, Nadia noted, and clients willing to take a chance on a new entity. Yes, I agreed. It does. Nadia studied me for a long moment, then smiled. Neurotech's contract with Helix includes a clause allowing us to follow key personnel if they leave the company. Did you know that? I wrote that clause, I admitted. Standard protection for clients to ensure continuity of service. How convenient. Nadia reached for her tablet and began typing. I'm sending you contact information for 3 other CEOs who have expressed frustration with their current strategic partners. All 3 value innovation over tradition. All 3 would appreciate your approach. By the end of the week, I had secured preliminary commitments from 7 former Helix employees to join my venture. Each brought unique expertise and their own client relationships. Each had a story about Thaddeus or the culture he had fostered. Together, we represented over 50 years of combined experience that Helix had discarded or devalued. I hadn't responded to the CEO's offer of a lateral move. Instead, I prepared my resignation letter, effective immediately. August supported my decision completely, though we both understood the risks of starting a new business. This isn't just about leaving Helix, I told him as I finalized my business plan. It's about creating something better. I know, he replied. That's why you'll succeed. 3 weeks after the gala, I launched Prism Strategies with 9 founding partners, all women who had left Helix under Thaddeus's leadership. We secured office space in a renovated industrial building across town. Our founding principle was simple: excellence recognized and rewarded, regardless of gender or background. News of our launch spread quickly through industry channels. By our 3rd day of operation, we'd received inquiries from 15 potential clients, including 3 who were currently contracted with Helix. Nadia publicly announced Neurotech's decision to follow me to Prism, citing exceptional results from my previous strategies. Then came the moment I had been quietly preparing for. Thaddeus, still on administrative leave but confident in his eventual reinstatement, filed a lawsuit against me alleging breach of contract, client poaching, and defamation. His legal team demanded emergency injunctions to prevent me from contacting any Helix clients. He expected me to fight back through legal channels, a process that would drain Prism's limited resources and distract me from building my new company. He expected fear and retreat. He didn't expect what happened next. I called a press conference, not to defend myself against his accusations, but to announce Prism's Advancement Initiative, a program providing mentorship, resources, and capital to women starting businesses after experiencing workplace discrimination. Our first recipient, Lyndon from accounting, who had warned me about Thaddeus's rumors and subsequently been passed over for promotion 3 times despite outstanding performance reviews. Prism Strategies believes that talent deserves opportunity, I told the assembled reporters. We're committing $1 million over 5 years to help women rebuild careers after experiencing systematic barriers to advancement. The announcement generated extensive coverage. 3 major business publications requested interviews about the initiative. During those conversations, I never mentioned Thaddeus by name. I didn't need to. His lawsuit against me became part of every story, the perfect illustration of the problem our initiative aimed to address. Potential clients noticed. Within days of the press conference, our inquiry list doubled. 2 women who had declined my initial invitation to join Prism reached out to reconsider. Most significantly, Helix's board of directors called an emergency meeting to discuss the company's public image crisis. 2 days later, Thaddeus was terminated. The official statement cited conduct inconsistent with company values, but everyone in the industry understood the real message. Helix was cutting losses. Thaddeus's lawsuit against me was withdrawn the same day. I should have felt victorious. Instead, I felt determined. This wasn't just about punishing one man for his actions. It was about changing the environment that had protected him for so long. 6 months after launching Prism, we had grown to 23 employees and secured contracts with 15 major clients. Our revenue exceeded first-year projections by 40%. The Advancement Initiative had supported 6 women in launching their own businesses, creating a network of mutual support and opportunity. Helix, meanwhile, struggled. After Thaddeus's departure, 3 more senior strategists left to start their own ventures. Clients began questioning the company's stability. Their stock price declined steadily as analysts noted their difficulty retaining top talent. On the anniversary of the gala where everything had changed, August and I attended the same event, this time openly as husband and wife. I now represented Prism Strategies, a rising force in the industry. As we entered the ballroom, conversations paused briefly before resuming with increased energy. Nadia approached us immediately. Eliza, perfect timing. There's someone you should meet. She guided us toward a small group near the windows. Have you been introduced to the new CEO of Helix? The woman who turned to greet us was familiar. Vivian Reeves, one of the 5 plaintiffs in the original discrimination lawsuit against Thaddeus. After the case settled, Helix's board had made the surprising decision to promote from within, choosing Vivian to lead the company's transformation. Eliza, Vivian said warmly, extending her hand. I've been hoping to speak with you. Congratulations on your appointment, I replied sincerely. Thank you. It's been illuminating. Her smile held a hint of irony. I've spent the past 3 months untangling the damage Thaddeus caused. The board finally recognized they had a systemic problem, not just one bad actor. And now? I asked. Now we rebuild, Vivian said, with a focus on merit rather than gender, with transparency rather than whispers. She glanced at the crowd around us. Some things had to be dismantled before they could be reconstructed properly. Later that evening, as August and I prepared to leave, I noticed a familiar figure standing alone near the bar. Thaddeus had aged visibly in the past year. His once confident posture had diminished. According to industry gossip, no major firm would hire him after details of the lawsuit became public. He had eventually found position at a small regional consultancy, a dramatic step down for someone who had once directed strategy for multinational clients. Our eyes met across the room. For a moment, I considered approaching him, not to gloat, but to acknowledge the strange symmetry of our situations. A year ago, he had tried to destroy my reputation with whispers and insinuations. Now he stood alone, his own reputation in ruins, while I led a thriving company built on the very talent he had tried to suppress. Instead, I simply nodded once in his direction, then turned away. My revenge wasn't in his downfall, but in what rose from the ashes of his destruction, a new model of success, a community of support for those he had harmed, a transformation of the system that had protected him. As we walked toward the exit, August took my hand. Are you satisfied with how things turned out? He asked quietly. I considered the question carefully. Not satisfied. I finally replied, determined. This was never just about Thaddeus or Helix or even my career. It was about changing what happens when someone says, she slept her way to the top. And have you changed it? I looked back at the ballroom, at Vivian leading Helix in a new direction, at Nadia speaking with two recipients of Prism's advancement initiative, at the industry that had begun, slowly but perceptibly, to evolve. We've started, I said, and that's enough for now. If you've stayed with me through this entire journey, thank you. Stories like mine happen every day in workplaces around the world. Talented people facing barriers built from whispers and assumptions rather than facts. If this resonated with you, please consider subscribing to hear more stories of justice and transformation. Your support helps these narratives reach those who need them most. Remember that real change doesn't always come from destroying what exists, but from building something better in its place.